If you found this video, you're worried about what's going on with the Ukrainian-Russian war. It's a cyber war that we've not seen ever in this level of intensity. We've had cyber warfare activities in the past, but not this level of intensity. 30 years plus experience I have out there, I've never been this level of intensity out there of different cyber activities. My name's Barry Green. I work for Akamai. This session is a retaping of a session that was put together for the NZITF. We'll make it available publicly so people can actually use this because it's valuable information to understand what's changed in the world. Now, the first thing on here we're going to point out is groups like NZITF. So NZITF is a collective. It's individuals. It's a nonprofit. It's people coming together to actually improve the cybersecurity posture of each other. All right, a lot of collaboration that goes on with it. There are other organizations out there like this. There's ISACs and different CSIRT groups and security organizations and cloud security alliances. Akamai participates with a lot of these different organizations. You should too, because as you'll see as we go through this session, one of the big defensive mechanisms we have is collective defense, working with your peers, collaborating with your peers. So this is, as we walk through the session here, be mindful of this. Ask yourself, are you part of one of these groups? And if you want some advice on it, just ping me, ask me. I can point you and give you introductions to many different organizations and pick the appropriate one that helps you out. All right. So what we're going to cover? We're going to cover what's going on with the differences between cyber warfare, why it's different from the cyber criminal threat vectors, why the world has changed. We're going to go through and point out the unprecedented March 21st Presidential Security Advisory. We've never had a Presidential Security Advisory. It's unprecedented, and people should be paying attention to it. And then part of paying attention to it is looking what's happening with the national CSIRTs. Especially, we're going to do a deep dive into the Five Eyes. If you know what the Five Eyes are, you're going to learn about what the Five Eyes Security Advisory is and watch out what to watch out for when they all collectively together go out there and put advisories out there, because that's what's happening right now. You can't ignore these things. And then we'll walk through the fact sheet from the 21st, because it's really, really, really interesting about what they actually presented in that fact sheet. It gives you a roadmap of what you need to do to take action to help reduce the risk to your organization, right? And what's it cost you? It costs you nothing. You don't have to hire any security consultants, anything. You just have to look at what they said to do and then work with your organization. So this is kind of like our path forward. So now let's talk about a SITREP situation report. What's going on? The Ukrainian war is going to be with us for quite a long time. This is not going to be like tomorrow there's a peace treaty and it's over. It's going to go on and on. The sanctions are going to go on and on, right? That means the consequences of this war is going to be with us for years, not months, years. That's just the nature of what happens with the cyber war at this scale. The threat vector changes on us because it used to be the state actors were different and they didn't do things. And state actors think differently. A ransomware person will go out there and say, what I want to do is make money. Criminals want to make money. What's my return on investment of breaking into an organization and figure out how to get money out of you, right? From ransom, from extortion, from selling your data, whatever. That's where the cyber criminal thinks. State actor is different. State actor is, how am I going to go into your organization and be destructive, be disruptive, cause fear, cause anxiety in the civilization, in the society around you. It's a different mode of thinking. Cyber warriors think differently from cyber criminals. They're not the same. So if you go out there and listen to different organizations and they talk about cyber criminals a lot, cyber criminals is still going to be there. But cyber warfare threat actors are different. They have different goals, different objectives, and that's one of the things we got to get our mind around as we look at this device going on, all right? So let's kind of look at it. I divided it into 4 areas, right? The 4 areas, cyber criminals. Cyber criminals have a criminal behavior. You just read about criminal behavior patterns in the physical world and they follow in the cyber world. You know, what's the return on investment? Don't get caught. You know, they have different principles. There's talks that I've given in the past about like the 7 habits of highly effective cyber criminals, right? So you can understand the threat behavior patterns. Cyber nation state threat actors are the same way. They have certain behavior patterns. Their job is to achieve the mission. What is my mission? Take out the electrical power of this in this country. How do I do that? That's their goal. And then they're going to figure out all different ways of taking out the electrical power in that company, in that country, right? So that's what happens. Now, one of the things, as we've seen in the past, is the battle space is everywhere, right? So how they achieve their goal, they can use the resources across the entire internet. And they're not alone because they get these volunteers out there. When you get, especially a cyber war, you get volunteers on both sides and they're doing things. Now, many times you can't control them. As we've seen in different past with nation states, sometimes the patriots, the political protesters and others will gather forces and then they'll just go off and start doing things and you can't control them. That's an increased risk to your organization, collateral damage and direct damage, right? Then you have the corporate organizations. And a lot of people ignore these. They don't realize it. But if you look out there like Michael Snowden worked for a company. And the company subcontracted to the National Security Agency, right, in the United States. Russia does the same thing. They have contractors that work for them. China does the same thing. UK does the same thing. Australia does the same thing. They all have corporations who actually expand the resources of the nation state. Now, during a cyber war, these corporations can be turned into weapons. They can be told, go take out the target, go do this, go, the given, your threat vector increases with this because of what the state actors can do. So when you look at the changes immediately, this is immediate changes, and this threat landscape will change over time. Nation state actors on both sides, they're both of them, they're a threat, right? So you can have forces on the Ukrainian side launch an attack against Russia, and their disruption can spill over, and then you have collateral damage all over the planet. Same way, Russia can go after Ukraine and collateral damage all over the planet, right? The battle space is the entire internet. If a packet can traverse the internet, you are part of that battle space, right? You get that patriarchal forces go out there and do things that, well, we didn't want them to do that, but they did it anyways because they thought it was a good idea. You have other nation states that will jump in and do this as leverage because with all this chaos, they can actually do their activities, right? So you're probably going to see more increased activities from other state actors doing things, right? So already, like, for instance, we're seeing like, oh, the North Koreans are going like, oh, this is good. We can make some money. Let's go steal some more crypto because they're looking at it from a money aspect of it. And that could be the future in the world for Russia, right? What's going on in North Korea, going after a lot of crypto resources so they can make money, foreign exchange, right? And then cyber criminal threats are not going to stop. The criminals are still out there. They're just going like, look at all this chaos. What can I do with this chaos? How can I make money? And they'll keep on going, right? So our threat landscape has intensified dramatically because of what's going on. And don't think that you're living some part of the world that protects you. Geography does not protect you. If you can get a packet to your organization, you're part of the battle space. Because this is what the world looks like, right? An attack like NoPetya, impacted the entire planet. Even though it's only supposed to target Ukraine, NoPetya went all over the place, right? So geography does not protect you. The retaliation to sanctions don't protect you. Costa Rica got hit by who? Conti. Conti declared themselves as a criminal crew, right? Cyber criminal crew who is allied with Russian state interests. Okay, what should I do? I'm going to take my cyber criminal activities. I'm going to target those countries who are sanctioning my homeland in Russia. And this is the sort of thing that's going on. All right. So borders do not protect you when you're part of the battle space. And we also have this other aspect. This is what we call cyber-kinetic issues. The cyber-kinetic issues is like VSAT. VSAT turned into be a cyber-kinetic attack because they're trying to take out the access for Ukrainian military. But then you had this collateral damage that hit other systems. It hit payment systems. It hit gas stations. It hit transportation systems. It hit the wind generation up in the North Sea from Enercon. Right? They had to send out people to every single one of the wind towers and go out there and climb to the top of the tower and replace the management units that they were using to manage the systems. That is what we call a cyber-kinetic attack. Right? It's very interesting about, this is the sort of thing we'll see more of. It used to be theoretical before because we didn't see a lot of them. Now we're probably going to see more and more of these sort of cyber-kinetic attacks. Right? And the cyber-kinetic attacks, volunteer groups. What if the volunteer group does a Stuxnet? A volunteer group can go out there, they have no control, and they go, oh, let's go look at this. I broke into this gas pipeline. Oh, I can control the valves in this gas pipeline. Oh, wow. If I take this valve here and this valve here and do it just right, oh, it blows up. Hey, this is cool. Let's go do that, right? Who controls them? They're volunteers. They're out there talking in Discord and figuring out what to do, right? They will just go do it. And this is a sort of intensity you get where you get a lot of passion going around cyber warfare activity, all right? And the capabilities and the lack of defenses. So this is where you go into why you get these alerts to all organizations to step up their cybersecurity activities and give specific things to work on first, right? As we'll see in there. Now, some people will say like, hey, but we're not seeing big things happening, but they're happening. Part of the alert mechanism that's going on right now is part of the cyber warfare. When you get organizations, like CISA from the United States and NCSC from UK and the Australian team and Canada and New Zealand all team together and say, please pay attention to these 4 things, do these 4 things. Those 4 things is part of cyber operations. Because if you get a whole bunch of organizations put the defenses up, you just blocked the operation of what you see that state actors are doing. So this is if you're trying to like participate, one of the key things that all organizations to do that's safe and doesn't cost you is to go through and protect yourself with these sort of recommendations. And that's going to actually help reduce the potential target space where you can be a target or you can be collateral damage, right? So cyber operations, a lot of times you don't see them publicly because they stay under the radar. Stuxnet was the example of that. When Stuxnet happened, it was out there, it was loud, people saw it. I was part of the different security trust groups that saw it. We immediately said something's going on. We're not sure what's going on. Let's shut it down. And we went out there and did remote trigger black holes all over the internet and shut the thing down. All right? Well, it still got in, it did its job, but that woke up a lot of state actors who said like, okay, there's these good guys out there who are going to protect the internet. If they don't understand it, they're going to protect it. So we got to not only hide from our target, we got to hide from the good guys. Okay, get this now. State actors, the way they think differently, is they have to hide from the organization they're going after, the country or whatever. They got to hide from them. So they got to stealthily get in there. And they also got to hide from the good guys. Because the good guys, if they don't understand what's going on, they're going to protect the collective. All the industry players collecting together, they're going to protect themselves, right? So this is one of the things that you have to be mindful of when you look at the press and say, well, I'm not seeing it in the press. Just because you don't see it in the press doesn't mean it's happening, right? So this is kind of one of the factors in there with it. Now, what's the impact to you? I tell people there's 3 things in a cyber warfare. When you got an active cyber warfare going on in the internet, you're one of 3. You're always one of 3. Every single attack vector, every single attack campaign, you're either a target, you're collateral damage, or you avoided it. You avoided the impact. All right? It doesn't mean it's not going to hit you next, right? Because the next round, you could be collateral damage. You could be the target. Or you could have avoided it again, right? So don't think that just because it hasn't hit me right now, it's not going to hit, the next thing is not going to hit me. In a cyber warfare operation, one of the things like a cyber criminal, they'll go out there and say, oh, let me go out there and try to extort this company. Oh, I'm not getting extorted, I'll move on. Okay, and they move on. They hit other easy targets, right? Because return on investment from criminal activities is a key factor for cyber criminals. Cyber warfare threat actors are different. I'm going to try it. It didn't work. I'll try something else. It didn't work. I'll try something else. It didn't work. All right? That's the sort of level of activities that you get out there that, if you avoided it the first time, you may not avoid it the next time if you're part of the target or collateral damage. So this is why organizations need to wake up for it. All right? There are changes going on out there. Don't expect, the world to kind of like sit on their hands and wait for the attacks. Like, for instance, DDoS. People say, oh, there's going to be a lot of DDoS. Actually, in a cyber warfare, cyber warriors don't want to do DDoS. Why do they not want to do DDoS? Well, if I put in backdoors to get into a chemical plant, and I want to, at the exact time, of the most critical damage, I'm going to go in there and start adjusting the things in the chemical plant to destroy it, to disrupt it, to blow it up, all right? I don't need a DOS attack to go out there and just kind of like flood the pipes where I can't get access to my command control, right? So you'll get these factors out there, but that doesn't mean that DDoS is not still there. Doesn't mean you still don't have the extortion DDoS going on out there, right? But the industry is actually working together. If you want to see how the industry is working together, during APRICOT, which is the Asia Pacific Internet Conference on Operational Technologies. It happens every year. But we had a security workshop then, and we did a panel session with some of the top DDoS experts on the planet. And it's interesting to hear their discussion and conversation about what they see as the threat vectors in there. We did a little roundtable, like simulating virtually what it would be if we all got together in the same place and we were sitting around having dinner with each other, asking each other questions, right? And you'll see the collaboration that's going on between different threat experts in the DDoS space. But that means we're going to get other threat vectors. And you've seen it already in the alerts. The APT, the intentional disruption, the destruction, those sort of things are the big risk areas today. Don't ignore DOS, because DOS is still out there. But DDoS is a part of a suite of activities where you got like destruction and disruption, and those sort of cyber sabotage activities are going to be more intentional, right? And this gets into what happened on the 21st of March. 21st of March, you had President Biden put out its security advisory. We don't have presidents putting out cybersecurity advisories. We'll have Cisco Systems and Akamai and, Cloudflare and different companies put out, here's cybersecurity, advisories, what to do, right? You'll have CISA and different national CSIRTs and NCSC put out security advisories. You don't have the President of the United States putting out a security advisory. This was a wake-up call with it. And then the fact sheet that went along with it was also a big wake-up call, which is why we're spending the majority of the section on those things. One of the things that people don't realize is over the past 5 years, 5 years ago, you'll have national CSIRTs and they'll put out an alert, and then people in the security industry will look at it once we find out, what was behind, the motivation to put the advisory out there, and we'll go like, okay, maybe it wasn't, the Chicken Little sort of thing. That changed. Like 5 years ago, everything started changing with the national CSIRTs. When they put something out, it's very intentional. They're putting out public information that has linkage to confidential intelligence and details. And so each advisory is basically provides subtle intelligence clues to the larger risk. All you need to do is, what I usually do is I print these out, I get my highlighters and my markers, and I start looking line by line. And when you put them together, especially, take advisory 1, advisory 2, advisory 3, you start seeing, here's the patterns, and you start going, okay, I see where they're getting towards. I need to work on A, B, and C inside my organization. So then I go into my organization to help make sure my organization is protected, and these are the things I focus on first. Security, we have a kitchen sink of things we have to work on. What do we work on first? This is a benefit to the world where you actually got organizations giving you a roadmap that says, here's how you can protect yourself. Right? So view it this way. What you get now with these advisories is you get the tip of the iceberg. You get TLP white, traffic protocol white, public information, TLP white, TLP green. Here are the recommendations. But all those recommendations are linked. They're linked to real attacks, real forensics, real investigations. Some of the stuff, like for instance in the fact sheet, the last part of it reads just like a root cause corrective intelligence actions where you went into an organization that got hit by Russian state actors, and then people went and said, here, if you did these things, here's how it would have been fixed. It was like a post-mortem action report. I know those because I've written those myself. I've read them many different times. And I'm reading this in this public fact sheet coming from the President of the United States going like, whoa, this is useful. And this is what we're going to point out to it later on. And it was reiterated because the day after that, on the March 22nd, March 21st advisory comes out, March 22nd, they did a 3-hour call. Now, 1 hour of that is publicly listed here, but the 3 hours was interesting listening to it because you got a context of the key things of what they were talking about, right? That there are new threat vectors that the Russian state actors are doing. There's new behaviors that they're doing, right? That they haven't seen before. And this all came up during the 3-hour call, that wasn't written down in it. It's pretty intense with it. Now, where's this all come from? Five Eyes, all right? So we'll be batting this term around for a while. Now, the Five Eyes, basically, there's this multilateral intelligence agreement that was signed years ago during the Cold War, where you got Australia, Canada, New Zealand, United Kingdom, United States, all combined together. We're going to share intelligence. That evolved where you also have cybersecurity intelligence, and they share with each other, right? So they're constantly sharing intel with each other. Here's the forensics and things like that. If you see two of these organizations put out a joint security advisory, pay attention. If you see all five of them put a security advisory out there, go through it with a fine-tuned code and figure out what you need to do, because it's actually got some really critical things going on. And you look around to the different ones. Don't just look at one. So if United States and you get the CISA one, don't just stop there. I'll point out why that's important. Because all of them, they're focusing on critical infrastructure. Now remember, critical infrastructure, why? Because critical infrastructure can turn into a cyber-kinetic risk. Oh, let's open up the valves to this dam. Oh, let's close the valves to this dam. Oh, let's shut down the intensive care unit at a healthcare facility. Oh, let's go and remove the food quality detectors, and shut them out, and all of a sudden you have, a infection going out in the food supply, right? These are the sort of things that are cyber-kinetic, and that's why critical infrastructure is so important to all the different organizations in a lot of countries, because that's the risk vector in there. So when you look at something like this, the urgency to disrupt cyber-kinetic consequences, that's what a lot of these are about. They're real intelligence going on, but underneath the water, right? The waterline. You get in the top of the iceberg, but there's a lot more going on. And what they're trying to do is to get everybody to pay attention here to say, if you do these things, it's going to help reduce the risk. Reduce the risk to your organization. Reduce the risk to your customers. And that's what they're trying to do. The nice thing about all these recommendations, when you look at it, is they're already on our list. People look at it and says, oh, but that's common sense. We should be doing multi-factor authentication. But what they point out in this advisory is to say, multi-factor authentication is not being configured properly. And the Russians are bypassing it. Right? Okay, that's different. So those are the sort of things that you pay attention to that actually are powerful, because it triages. So you're not trying to do cybersecurity from a kitchen sink. You're trying to do cybersecurity from I'm going to focus on these few things. And the reason why you look at all of them, here's a sign up for it. So one of the things, I'll throw this slide at the end too to look at it. But every single one of these organizations, I sign up for the security advisories. Now I added one more in here, which is ENISA, which is the European Union Agency for the Cybersecurity. And each of them had different flavors of how they actually address this to the constituency, right? And ENISA is part of that. ENISA is more strategic in their advice and sort of guidelines in there. So it's very worthwhile to have and connect and get the news and get the updates and get the updated guides and things like that from all of them, right? So this is kind of like, ideas, to sign up for it. And if for your own country, if you're not part of any of these countries out there, if you're like from Japan, JP-CERT, Singapore, CERT, India, the CERT teams there. Indonesia, there's a couple of CERT teams there. Look at FIRST. FIRST is a forum for incident response and security teams. It has all the different security teams from different countries as a member of FIRST. So you go there, you find out which one's appropriate to your country, and then you can sign up and talk to them, right? And get their advisories also with it, right? So subscribe to all of them, right? Subscribe to all of them. And some people say, well, I get duplicate. No, you don't. Like, for instance, during the initial broadcast, I did this for the NZITF. NCSC spoke up and said, hey, by the way, we got our advisory too, and here's what we do. They do a special flavor. They do a specialization where they customize their tune into the constituents to New Zealand, and they collect all the Five Eyes details in other organizations, and they summarize it together to make it easier for their constituents, right? That's different from what CISA does. That's different from what UK NCSC does. That's different from what Australia does. So if you collect them all together, you'll find, here's useful tools. What's it cost you? Signs up to a mailing list, right? You don't have to spend, for expensive threat intelligence. No insult to my colleagues who work at threat intelligence organizations, but here's tools out there that taxpayers are paying for that you can tap into, right? What's the consequence not paying attention? During a session, I was updating the DDoS resiliency workshop that I did at APRICOT back in February, March. And one of the things I stumbled upon because I didn't pay attention to it. I wasn't doing router security, but as I was updating the router security, you have the National Security Agency basically say, if you're not doing the advanced password types on Cisco systems, assume the Russian state actors have access to your routers. Let me say that again. The National Security Agency, if you're not doing the most advanced password protection on your Cisco routers, assume the Russians have control, have your passwords to your routers. And they're exposed where you can do connections from the internet, they can get into your routers. And they probably already have. That was 2018. 2018, they said that. And then in 2022, February, they said, and they're going active. And then they're starting to do it. And then 2 weeks ago, I was running into a customer. They said, oh yeah, the Russians did that to our routers in Russia. So they're not like playing around with these risks. And you ignore them at your own consequence, right? So don't ignore these sort of risk factors in there, right? And if you want to find out more about this, I did a big breakdown of what happened with the 2018 to the 2022. And then, then 2 weeks ago, we heard about what's going on with the other ones out there. So let's take a deep breath. You see what's going on with the state actors out there. Everything's changed with a cyber war situation. The state actors are now active. So what do we do now? All right, let's walk through the fact sheet, because you had the Presidential Security Advisory on the 21st with a fact sheet that went along with it that actually said, here's what to do with it. But before we get into that, don't go out there and I've run into many colleagues and say, it's enough, these are common sort of things to do. It's not about whether, yes, these are best common practices. These are best common security practices. That's not the point of these advisories coming out. What they're doing, they're not trying to throw the kitchen sink at things. What they're trying to do is say, okay, do these few things. If you do these few things, it's going to disrupt this operation. And it's going to protect your organization, right? So for the past 3 to 5 years, they've been going down and getting into details. Here's details. You have to dig into it to see what's going on with it, right? So this is what we're going to go through with the fact sheet, right? That was step by step, each recommendation. Don't dismiss them. But before we go there, this was a joint advisory. The President of the United States put out an advisory, Australia put out an advisory, and CSC put out an advisory. Okay? Now, when I say there's a different flavor, it's one of the things I tell people when they look at US CISA. No insult to US CISA, but a lot of times US CISA will throw a lot of information at you. And you look at it and you go like, oh, what do I start? I said, okay, if it's a joint advisory, go to Australia first. You go to Australia, and Australia likes to simplify it. They'll take the information, they'll make it simpler. And so instead of having this whole list of fact sheet, they've reduced it down to 4 things. The 4 things they said, patch. Particularly if it's internet-facing, patch it, right? Patching does a range of different things besides eliminating vulnerabilities, but also churns the activity going out there and disrupts any threat operations, right? Then watch out for phishing, spear phishing attacks. Protect your credentials. They put something here that wasn't in the fact sheet, which was login. Make sure your login works. So in other words, what you're getting for the Australians is something that was part of that under the water threat intelligence. They probably saw in there as part of this forensic work that people aren't turning on the login to detection and it's not functioning properly, right? And then all of them, everybody said, review your incident response and continuity plans. And I've been seeing this myself. A lot of people, a lot of organizations have not been updating their continuity plans for business and for incident response. And then something happens and they find out the plans don't work, right? Oh, we have an APT attack. What's our response plan for APT? Oh, it doesn't work. It's actually, we've upgraded our antivirus to an EDR and everything's changed. Okay, update those plans, right? Review them and update them, right? So Australians simplified it down. NCSC also put an advisory out there. Now, NCNC is different. They think more proactively. They're more chess players, right? They have, brilliant security strategists like Dr. Ian Levy there. He put out a alert on there is worth reading about Russian technology, right? But so they'll go out there and say, okay, we know we're going to have things going on with the cyber war. We know we're going to have to do things. So they created a document back in January, February of what to do step by step when you have a heightened threat vector, right? This is industry, open to anybody. So if you're a CISO and you're looking for what do I do now, here's your guidebook. All right, you go to NCSC in UK, you say actions to take when the cybersecurity threat is heightened, A, B, C, D. So that way when these things happen, right, the different cyber war activities, the NCSC can point to this document and they tweak that document, update it, right? So they did a little bit more strategic. So this is an example of why you pull in all these resources, because they give you different tools. So when you're trying to figure out, okay, what do I do now? It gives you tools. If you take the Australian ones first, you can take the NCSC second, and then you look at a CISA work. Okay? That's one example of what you can do with these sort of things. So let's talk about the fact sheet. The fact sheet, they say straight up, we urge companies to execute the following steps urgently. Do this urgently. Do this right away. So what are the steps? Number 1, multi-factor authentication. Yes, we should have multi-factor authentication turned on, but have you checked your configurations? One of the things that came out in past advisories and came up again on the conference briefing call that they did for U.S. Constituents was that the Russians are using misconfigured MFA and getting into the system. So you can say, hey, I got multi-factor authentication. I'm okay. But then the Russians are going through and say, they haven't configured it properly. We're bypassing it. And they're bypassing it, right? So it's not just MFA. It's also, if you have MFA, go back and check to make sure everything is configured properly, right? Antivirus. A lot of organizations say, I have antivirus, but antivirus is like 15 years old technology, right? What people do today is they use endpoint detection and response systems, right? It does a lot more. What you have to do is a lot more on your endpoints to protect yourself, right? Now, if you don't know, if you're using antivirus and you say, what is EDR? Red Canary, right? Red Canary has a really good guide. I went out there. I said, okay, what can I give you, people who are watching this, as a guide to get started if you have no idea what EDR is, right? And evolve it. Our organization, Akamai, since I've been in Akamai, we're on our 3rd EDR system. I've been here since 2015 and we're on our 3rd. That's great. That means our InfoSec people are doing an evaluation, the check-in, and evolving, right? Constantly, right? So the system it's one of those things you constantly evaluate and figure out what gives you, as an organization, the best tools to push back and to defend yourself in the intel with it, and it evolves because it's a very competitive space, all right? So this is a good tool. Look at the Red Canary tool to get started on that area. Aggressively patch. We saw it with the Australians. But aggressively patch not only plugs in holes, but it also disrupts. Because one of the things that goes on, a threat actor a lot of times will get into unpatched systems. And if all of a sudden they turn around and find the systems behind them patched, they go like, okay, that messed up my operation. I have to use a different vector, a different team. I've disrupted their operations. So patching protects you. Patching also disrupts operations, right? So you go out there and they say, if you get an alert out there that says patch right now, it means patch right now. Because patching can not only minimize your risk, it actually can disrupt an existing threat vector that's already into your system, right? Check your passwords. So matter of fact, just assume the Russians have your passwords. So imagine this. State actors are different. Cyber criminals, there are cyber criminals organizations out there that go out there and get all the breach data. Have you ever thought of what happens with all this breach data? Companies say, usernames, passwords get breached all the time. Details of users get breached all the time. Well, there are cyber criminals that build data lakes, right? They spend money and they acquire these, exposed information. They put it together with good intelligence and they create tools and they sell them to cyber criminals. So if a cyber criminal wanted to figure out how to go after me, they may go after me through my wife, through my kids, right? Through my house. All that is there, right? People just assume that it's all out there, right? Now, a state actor, think of this. State actor, you don't have a budget limitation. You just go out there and grab all this information. You put it into this big data lake. You put it in an intelligent resource. Then you combine it with your, other intelligent resources and collecting information on people. Now you got this really rich data set. If you want to go after a corporation and figure out how to get in and figure out the passwords, you could have it right there. Expect the Russians to have a huge data lake of all the breach data. So don't think that, oh, wow, people can't find me. They can find you. They can find all your personal passwords, all your personal accounts, all your family's personal accounts, all of that. Just assume all of that. So you got to do things to actually turn your credentials. Have good, two-factor authentication. Luckily, we have tools to help you out. So give an example. Apple, Chrome, Firefox, they all have tools now that saying like to help with this process, right? So this has changed. I did, when I was building these slides several last month, I grabbed a screenshot of this and I quickly said, oh, I got to change this. I got 4 compromised passwords. I got to go, find those and fix those, right? And that's what happens. Now, here's me as a cybersecurity professional. I'm constantly password security aware. A lot of two-factor authentication everywhere. I can put 2FA on, right? And it still happens. So thank goodness for tools like this. Apple has an equivalent tool, right? But if you want to go through an interest and exercise with your team, just take the team and have little work groups and sit down and take all their email addresses, corporate and personal email addresses, and stick them in Have I Been Pwned? And then all their passwords, dig up all their passwords and put them in Have I Been Pwned? And it's always amazing, right? I'm doing this once a month. I go on there and go through, different passwords I don't have 2FA on, and even passwords I do have 2FA on. I stuck it into Have I Been Pwned? Here's the password. Oh, the password shows up. Okay, can't use that password anymore. It's burnt. It's in the big data lake that the Russians have and cybercriminals have, right? This is a big wake-up call. Every time I've done this with different teams, it kind of goes like, wow, I really got to pay attention to this. And thank goodness for tools. Tools are built into browsers, tools like Have I Been Pwned, right? You don't have to spend money on this. And this is a good educational tool to help people kind of, get motivated about security. Backups with that, is something that people say to have. Offline backups, of course, logical. But what they're saying with this is the Russians are particularly going after offline backups. And one of the interesting things with this and saying, oh, I got offline backups and I'm all protected. But when I say, okay, what's your security plan to protect your backups? Oh, well, we got our firewall. So, okay, just understand. If they're going after your backups, they're bypassed your firewall. How are you protecting your backups? And you get blank stares. I've never run into an organization who've had a security plan to protect their backups. The backups are online and the backups are offline. The backups are off-site. Never run into, an organization that had a security plan around it. And that's showing where the Russian state actors, that's what the warning here is going on. It's the Russian state actors are going after these backup systems, right? So how do you, and this is shown in many different ways. CERT all right? Remember, we're using resources all over the internet. The New Zealand CERT team has this really cool tool that shows a simplified life cycle of a ransomware incident. And it points out there, ransomware people destroy the backups so I can exfiltrate the data. And, this is what Russian state actors are doing too. It's just that a state actor will say, I don't care about data exfiltration. I'm just going to destroy the backups, right? So, lastly on here, as the Australians played out there, is your security playbook going to work? You should have minimal of 3 playbooks ready to go, incident playbooks. DDoS, ransomware, APT, and a business continuity. Business continuity includes disasters, tornadoes, floods, things like that, right? And cybersecurity. That's your minimal 3. You may have more depending on your organization. Once or twice a year, checking this out is not enough anymore. The network is changing way too much. The technology we're deploying is changing way too much. Systems around us are changing all the time, right? Different people are moving at different paces of operation. So when organizations say, go check your playbook, it's really, really important, right? So next thing they say in there is expect your data to get stolen. Just expect it to get stolen. They say Encrypt your data so it cannot be used if stolen. That's data integrity and security. A lot of organizations don't go this far. They say, oh, I'm going to try to protect the data, put firewalls around it, put security around it. They don't think of a context of, okay, none of my defenses are going to work like I expect, and they're going to get my data, and it's going to be out online. How do I protect it? What's the encryption I use to protect that data? Just assume it's going to be breached. This is difficult. This is more long-term for a lot of organizations because they have to rethink their data security out there, right? So just expect it to, this is showing that state actors, the Russian state actors, are actually grabbing the data and running with it, right? And it's not encrypted. That means they can use it, right? So that's what they're saying with the fact sheet, right? Then the other thing in here got lost. I was disappointed. They say, oh, educate your employees, right? Yes, best common practice, educate employees. But the key thing in here they put in there, and I highlighted, encourage them to report. Because during a conference call, they kept on saying, encourage them to report. Now, why is that important? And this is something I'm probably going to do a presentation on where I kind of give examples of following the thread. So I'll give an example. 2009, Google Aurora, Chinese state actors got in. We found it by following a thread. Somebody was looking at this DNS beacon from a takedown. There was a group of industry players. They took down this piece of malware. They got it sunk into a sinkhole for DNS. The person who was maintaining it, looking at it, they're looking at the logs and say, wait a minute, I'm getting this beacon coming from this organization. This is not, wait a minute, this is not command and control. This is something else. What's going on here? Calls up the other organization and says, I got this going on. Should this be here? No. Okay, let's go follow the thread. We'll follow the thread. And that led to the entire what's going on with the operations with the Chinese state security in multiple organizations all over, which you can read about in Wikipedia with Operation Aurora. Tripped over the thread. That happens all the time. A lot of state actors, nobody knows. A lot of APT, nobody knows. You trip over the thread, and then you start following it. And then you start uncovering it. That only happens if people report. They see something, and they're trained to, if you see something abnormal, call, talk to somebody. And that's the behavior to encourage when you update your team. Turn everybody into a security alert mechanism. So you want to train them, you want to help them to do good best practices, anti-phishing, all the different techniques out there, but also encourage them to report. Here's a line. Have them report to someplace so that way they become everybody in your team, everybody in your organization becomes part of your security sensor system. It's really important with that. And then, they put this final piece of devices, talk to, the different organizations. This was a US alert, but, if you don't, as I mentioned before, first.org, www.first.org, will list all the different cybersecurity incident response teams in different countries. So you can find yours for your country, and then you can work with them and talk with them, all right? So that's the first part of the fact sheet. That's a lot, but it gives a triage. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you think of best common practices they didn't include. Notice they didn't talk about DDoS because the Russian threat actors are not doing DDoS, right? Now, the volunteers may be doing DDoS, but the Russian state actors are not doing DDoS. They're doing this. But then they get into the second part. The second part was like, whoa, I've read things like this. This is kind of like a root cause corrective action post-mortem from a security, forensics inside of an organization that got hit by Russian state actors. So you think of this as US CISA, FBI, NSA, top security investigators, private organizations going in and they're coming up with their findings. Here's the findings. If you did this, you would not have been hit. Number one, they say the findings. Build security into your products from ground up. Don't bolt it in. All right? Bake it in, don't bolt it in. And I got these old pictures from like years and years ago, right? You can't put security around, a car, safety and security. You just got to design it. It's got to be part of it. It's got to be integrated into it. And so many organizations, when you ask them, do you have a security development lifecycle? Oh yeah, we got some PowerPoint slides. Okay, but what do you do on your security development lifecycle? And they don't. And in a world where supply chain is also at risk, you got to work down through the supply chain. Are they doing security from ground up or security after the fact? Or security only when you ask them to? Or security when you're trying to get a certification like HIPAA or something like that? That stuff doesn't work. It can't be an afterthought. The other thing they found is compartmentalization in software engineering. Oh, I'm going to make it easy for my software engineers to do code so they can jump around and touch everything. Oh, yeah, anybody can jump in code and put it into the compiler. Oh, anybody can have access to the keys to sign the software before we ship it out to the customer. I look at it and go, whoa, it's no compartmentalization. So in other words, one team, one side of the organization can touch the code for another side of the organization. How you do, what happens if somebody breaks in over here? That means lateral movement is so easy going across. Microsegmentation is critical. Microsegmentation is not a new thing. Microsegmentation has been around since the Rainbow Book series from the late 80s. If anybody knows what a Rainbow Book series is, good for you. You've been doing your homework. If you're a young person, if you're an old person, you'll may remember the Rainbow Book series. Microsegmentation is not new, but it's critically important, and most organizations don't even think about it in their engineering environment. And this is what they're pointing out. So that means Russian state actors got into one side of the code compromise, and they were able to laterally move across and compromise other code somewhere else, right? This is what they're saying. This is what happened to some one or more organizations out there. Vendors don't check their code for vulnerabilities. You should be asking your customers, or your vendors, are you checking your code? How are you checking your code? Give me your plan of how you check your code. What do you do when you find your code? What's your system? And don't let them get away with any excuse. Don't let them get away. There's an old session I did years ago called, demand security from your vendors. It gives a checklist of what to do. There are other checklists out there, right? That go out there and say, ask these questions, have these meaningful conversations, right? Ask them if they're using things like the common vulnerability scoring system to triage which vulnerability in their static analysis are they doing versus A versus B, because you can expect they can't fix it all at once, right? But they have to be fixing. They have to be finding the vulnerabilities and fixing the vulnerabilities. They have to have an emergency release cycle. There's a bunch of things to ask them. This is up to you, if you're watching this, to go to your vendors, routers, switches, servers, softwares, everybody, and ask them, what are you doing for checking code? And ask the details. And you can follow this. There's a guide out there. There's questions to ask. There's, when you look at that, they give you kind of like a game plan of the conversations to have. Then they also don't check open source. And open source has really been, over the last 2 years, we've been having a lot of interest in open source where people plug in open source and they don't tell anybody. You got coders taking shortcuts. And then what happens is you run it through like a tool like Black Duck or some other tool, and you find out that open source is there. And then if it's not integrated properly from the beginning, it is a pain getting it fixed right, because then you got delays in the code and disrupts operations. You can use open source in your code. Licensing allows you to do open source. So if you are somebody who builds software and you're watching this, you can do it. You can put it in your software bill of materials. There's no problem using open source. Just do it properly. Document it properly. Have an upgrade plan to say, when a vulnerability is found in this open source, here's how we upgrade the open source inside of our code base. Here's how we notify our customers. You can do all that, right? It's organizations do that sort of approach, and you could do it too. What they're saying here is this is what happened to people. Organizations, open source was not fixed properly, and the Russian state actors got in, all right? So that's what they're saying here, all right? Then finally, they wrap it up and say, time to comply, U.S. companies. Because U.S. companies, last year in May 2021, they had an executive order that says, okay, we're going to get you guys to up your game cybersecurity-wise. Well, that's all turned into laws. That's turned into new regulations. So the timeline is chugging along, and a lot of organizations haven't been paying attention, and they can easily find themselves where they say, like, you're not certified, federal government, we can't buy from you, right? So they're given a warning with that, right? So that's the final thing they put in there. It says, pay attention to these new requirements that you have, right? So now what's next? Take a deep breath. It's a lot, all right? So the threat is going to go on for a while. State actor activity is now, the ice was broken in a big way, and we're going to have a lot of different activities out there. So watch for my next presentation, because as I'm taping this, another advisory has come out from all the Five Eyes talking about what's going on with this Russian state actors, right? So we'll get a breakdown of what's going on with these Russian threat actors and what they're doing, right? So more intelligence. You didn't have to pay for it. You just have to download it and read it. Treat this as a triage risk. And the other cool thing about this is none of these recommendations do any harm. They're all part of security best practices. So if you go and take your team, if you're an executive, you're a CISO, you're a CIO, you're a CEO, you're part of a board seat. So board goes out there, tells the CEO, says, make sure this happens, pull the team together, give them time to get the work done, right? It's not going to hurt, because all these things are security practices that is going to increase your security resiliency for your business and security resiliency for your customers. They're not going to hurt. It's just that what these organizations are doing is giving you a triaged action list. Do these things first, and you're going to significantly reduce your threat to the Russian threat actors and the cyber warfare activity. And then when they come out with new ones, do those first, right? We have a big list of do in the cybersecurity world of activities, but we only have X amount of resources and so many hours in a day. And then cybersecurity resources get burnt out. So you need to focus and make really big focused impact. And this is a tool to help you have focused impact inside your organization. So if any of this seems new, because it's a new way of looking at how you look at the security advisories coming out from like groups like CISA and NCSC UK and Australia and New Zealand and Canada, good. I'm glad it seems new to you. It can help you prepare. Think about how it can prepare. Walk it through with your colleagues and figure out what the top security worries are, all right? If you're looking for meaningful conversations, talk to your vendors. Akamai is one of the vendors out there. Also look at your security groups. As I mentioned with this was originally done for the NCITF. NCITF has a whole community, has Slack groups, email lists. There's conversations going on all the time where they're going through these sort of activities with it to help with collective defense, right? Then you're not alone, right? So then you got your peers who are not your vendors, and your peers are working together. You got groups like MOG, APWG. If you want to get a list of them, just ping me. I can give you a whole list of them. You know, that's the appropriate one for your community, right? And there's appropriate one for communities too. There's groups for like the oil industry and the electrical industry, the chemical industry, and the shipping industry, right? So you got lots of cybersecurity communities you can tap into. And then go through the different playbooks. You know, there's some examples in there that this session will point out to, 9 practical steps to prepare for DDoS attacks. You can use that same sort of approach for ransomware and APT and, business continuity plans. Right? So go through and do those plans with it. Finally, with this, sign up. That's the key action with this. Sign up, read these alerts coming up. So number 1, get the alerts coming to your mailbox. Get the alerts coming to your Twitter, right? If you're on Twitter. A lot of security activities on Twitter, right? So if you're not if you're a cybersecurity professional and you're not doing a lot of Twitter work, get on Twitter, because a lot of the updates that happen right now are on Twitter, right? So there's a whole bunch of things to sign up to on Twitter, right? And use them. I mean, every day I'm looking at the different groups coming out of this and different alerts, and paying attention to it and finding out what I need to do for my organization, because I work for Akamai right now, and what I need to do for sessions like this to help you to communicate so you can actually increase your security posture. So thank you for your time. Look at the other videos and activities on here with this. If you have questions, feel free to email me. I enjoy working with other organizations and empowering them. Sign up on LinkedIn with me. Pop me a note on WhatsApp or Signal, but give a heads up, because it'll be some strange phone number. I won't know who you are. So you just say, I'm so-and-so, and then we can have a conversation. Looking forward to it. So I hope this has been helpful, and looking forward to your questions.